But I like that you mentioned about center stage and the traveling because I want to go in a different direction as far as promoting and not being in a center stage, going outside of that in those events, doing shows like Bash at the Beach, doing shows like Hog Wild and Sturgis, where you're not in a television ready place, you're not in a studio, you're outside. What were some of the biggest obstacles that maybe us as a viewer take for granted from a production standpoint or from a promotion standpoint, handling those outside events or places that aren't specifically built to have events like that?
Well, I mean, you look at Bash at the Beach, the first one we did outdoors might have been in Southern California. That was kind of a low risk situation because the weather's almost always good.
Huntington Beach 95 is what George is telling me.
So anytime you do an outdoor event, there's variables you don't have control. In a venue, you can control the weather. You can't control how many people show up. When you're doing a show outside, you always have that awareness that you're not sure how many people are going to show up until they do, but you've got the weather to deal with. Sturgis was another one. If I was ever nervous, it would have been in Sturgis.
Yeah.
Unlike Southern California, the weather in Western South Dakota is much like Orlando in the summertime. I don't know if you've ever spent any time in Florida in the summer, but you can set your watch to about 4:45 every afternoon, and you know there's going to be a thunderstorm because all that heat and stuff builds up during the day, and then as it rises, all that heat rises, it gets up into the colder atmosphere, and you get a thunderstorm. Right? It happens every day in Florida. You know it's going to happen, and you also know it's only going to last for about an hour and a half or 2 hours, and then the sun's going to come out, and everything's going to be fine. You can predict. In Sturgis, it was kind of the same thing. It wasn't as consistent. But you had kind of the same thermal effects, not to go all aviation with it, but you have the same kind of conditions where you had a lot of humidity in the air still in Western South Dakota. It got really hot during the day. The heat rises, the moisture, the heat gets up into the upper atmosphere, and boom. We got all setting up all day long. Now we're really outside. We started getting reports that there's going to be severe thunderstorms in the evening, right about the time we're supposed to shoot our show. And we're watching the weather radar. I was a pilot at the time, so I had my own access to certain types of aviation weather on my computer. So I'm watching my aviation weather. I'm checking the upper wind patterns, and I'm going, man, this is going to be horrible. There were other people too that had their own monitoring systems, more sophisticated than mine. And they were coming to me and saying, hey, bro, you need to think about maybe postponing the show by at least an hour or two. Well, that's a little hard to do with a pay-per-view because you've got satellite time booked, you promoted it. I mean, that raises all kinds of other issues, as I learned when you go off the air early, for example.
Right.
So I knew that wasn't doable. And literally, I remember 45 minutes before the show was supposed to start, this just muck or fudder of a hailstorm came in. It was like 50-mile-an-hour winds, hail the size of small, probably tennis balls, at least. And they were whipping, man. When I say 40 to 50-mile-an-hour winds, I'm not exaggerating. That's not uncommon around the mountains. So where I live, 45-mile-an-hour wind day is kind of commonplace after about November 1st. But it was just brutal. Literally, I'm watching giant monitors flapping in the wind, giant steel trusses that rigged our lighting. They're weaving back and forth like a horror movie. It was just god awful. And there was no backup.
Was there a backup?
Let's just jump on a bike and let's just go to Minneapolis. We were there. 20 minutes before the show started, the skies opened up, the sun came out. He could have never told anything happened, but it got a little hairy.
Yeah. So were you feeling nervous or excitement during that time?
No, I was fear. That's another level. No backup.
That's bold.
I know, man. That's what gray hair is made out of.
That leads me to something that I want to talk about because, of course, any live production is always nerve-wracking, but it's so fun. That's what makes it great.
I want to be a part of that to change the perception of the automotive industry and their ad agencies. Shortly thereafter, we started getting oil and gas sponsorships. After that, we got involved with NASCAR. It
Right.
worked very well. So from a critical point of view, from a wrestling person's point of view, or wrestling fan's point of view, or worse, the dirt sheet writers who thought they knew everything that I was doing and why, to them it seems stupid. Why would you give up the game? Because I believe that if we were successful over the course of a couple of years, we would probably, in the aggregate, be able to attract $3 to $5 million worth of advertising every year that we wouldn't otherwise get. So will I give up $100,000 in ticket sales to potentially see a $3 million in sponsorship and advertising? Pretty much every day, all day.
Yeah, absolutely. My dad wasn't a big pro wrestling fan, but he loved motorcycles. And I was watching the show. He says, "Hey, that's Sturgis." And that was one of the only shows he sat down and watched the whole thing with me. So, for whatever that's worth, you got a viewer for a day from my dad. Now, this show, we talk about promoters, not all of them are going to be at the level that you're at.